I asked 12 of my patients over 55 to do one thing for 30 days. Just one thing. Stop eating bread. Not all carbohydrates, not all grains, just bread in all its forms. White bread, brown bread, sourdough, rolls, toast, and wraps. 30 days, no bread. What happened to their blood sugar, their weight, their joints, their energy, and their digestion genuinely surprised me. And two of the results I did not expect at all. Today I am going to walk you through exactly what we observed and what the science says about why. First, let me be clear about what this was and was not. This was not a clinical trial. It was an observation. 12 patients, ages 55 to 72, who agreed to remove bread specifically from their diet for 30 days without making any other deliberate changes. They did not go on a diet. They did not count calories. They replaced bread with other foods naturally. More vegetables, more eggs, more rice on occasion, more fruit. I asked them to track how they felt weekly across 5 areas: energy, joint comfort, bloating and digestion, sleep, and weight. Here's what they reported. The first change, and the one that happened fastest, was a reduction in bloating and digestive discomfort. Within the first week, 9 of the 12 patients reported noticeably less abdominal bloating. For most of them, this was something they had lived with so long they had stopped noticing it. When it went away, they noticed its absence immediately. The likely explanation is twofold. Modern bread, particularly commercial white and brown bread, contains significant amounts of fructans, a type of fermentable carbohydrate that feeds gut bacteria and produces gas as a byproduct. For many adults over 55 whose gut microbiome has shifted with age, fructans are a major driver of bloating that goes completely undiagnosed because nobody is testing for it. Additionally, a small but meaningful percentage of people over 55 have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, not celiac disease, but a genuine inflammatory response to gluten that produces digestive symptoms, fatigue, and even joint pain. Removing bread removes both fructans and gluten simultaneously, which is why the digestive response was so rapid and so consistent. The second change was in blood sugar stability. I had 7 patients in this group who were either pre-diabetic or managing type 2 diabetes. All 7 reported more stable energy through the day, less of the mid-morning crash and the 3 p.m. slump that had become normal for them. 2 of them shared glucose monitoring data that showed measurably lower post-meal glucose spikes on days they did not eat bread compared to their previous baseline. This is not surprising when you understand the glycemic impact of bread. White bread has a glycemic index comparable to pure glucose. But even whole grain bread, marketed as a healthy alternative, raise whole grain bread, marketed its blood sugar significantly in most people over 55 because the aging gut processes starches differently and insulin sensitivity declines with age. When bread is removed, the largest single source of rapid glucose for most people disappears, and blood sugar becomes more predictable. The third change was in joint comfort, and this is one of the 2 results I did not fully anticipate. 6 of my 12 patients reported reduced joint stiffness and pain, particularly in the mornings. 3 of them described it as significant. Now, bread itself is not inherently inflammatory, but refined wheat products, particularly those made with white flour, promote a mild but chronic low-grade inflammatory state in susceptible individuals through their effect on gut permeability and blood sugar. Chronic elevation of blood glucose drives systemic inflammation. For people whose joint pain has an inflammatory component, which includes most forms of arthritis, reducing that inflammatory load, even slightly, can produce noticeable relief. I want to be careful not to overstate this. Bread is not the cause of arthritis, but for certain individuals, removing it reduces one source of inflammatory input, and the joints feel the difference. The fourth change was in weight, and this one is important to understand correctly. The average weight loss across my 12 patients over 30 days was 2.1 kilograms. But I do not want you to take from this that bread makes you fat or that removing it is a weight loss strategy. What actually happened is simpler. Bread is calorie dense and not particularly filling relative to its calorie content, especially raises for people over 55 whose appetite regulation hormones are less sensitive than they were at 40. When bread was removed, most patients naturally replaced it with higher protein and higher fiber foods that kept them full longer. They ate less overall without trying to. The The weight loss was a downstream consequence of better satiety, not something magical about bread removal itself. The fifth change, and the second one that surprised me, was in sleep quality. 5 patients spontaneously reported sleeping better by week 3. I had not asked about sleep specifically. They volunteered it. The connection here is indirect but real. Better blood sugar stability through the day means lower cortisol fluctuations in the evening. Lower evening cortisol makes it easier to fall asleep and stay asleep. Several patients also reported less nighttime acid reflux, a common complaint in the 55+ group, which further improved sleep continuity. Bread, particularly eaten close to bedtime, is a common reflux trigger due to its effect on gastric acid and the lower esophageal sphincter. So what is the conclusion? Higher fiber. Should everyone over 55 stop eating bread permanently? No, that is not what this tells us. What it tells us is that for a significant proportion of people over 55, bread, particularly refined commercial bread consumed multiple times per day, is particularly contributing to symptoms that have been normalized and attributed to aging. Bloating, energy crashes, joint stiffness, poor sleep, gradual weight gain. These are not inevitable. They may, in part, be dietary. If you are experiencing any of the 5 things I described today, and you have never experimented with removing bread for 30 days, you now have a reason to try. It costs nothing. It takes 30 days. And based on what I observed, there is a reasonable chance you will be surprised by what changes. If you try it, pay attention to the same 5 areas my patients tracked: digestion, energy, joints, weight, and sleep. The results will tell you more about your body than any food sensitivity panel I could order.